Paul Walker did not say a single word when Vin Diesel leaned in and whispered those poisonous 6 words into his ear at the rap party. But when Paul calmly reached into his jacket and pulled out a small black tape that nobody knew existed, every single person in that room understood that Vin Diesel had just made the biggest mistake of his entire career. The rap party was held inside a private rooftop venue in downtown Los Angeles, the kind of place reserved for productions that printed money. Crystal glasses caught the warm yellow light from above. The smell of grilled lobster drifted from the open kitchen, mixing with the salt of the ocean breeze that climbed all the way up from the Pacific. Industry executives, stunt coordinators, camera operators, and assistants moved between the tables, laughing too loudly, drinking too much, congratulating each other for surviving another grueling shoot. The franchise had once again broken records. Everyone in that room knew they were standing inside a kingdom built on car engines, brotherhood, and a chemistry that audiences could feel even through their television screens. Paul Walker stood near the railing, a glass of water in his hand. He never drank at events like this, not since his daughter was born. He preferred the quiet. He preferred watching. He had always been the one who listened more than he spoke, the one who arrived early on set and left late, the one who memorized not only his own lines, but the lines of every other actor around him. People often mistook his calmness for passivity, his kindness for weakness, his silence for absence. They were always wrong about him. He just did not feel the need to prove it out loud. Vin Diesel had been holding court at the center table for almost 2 hours by that point. His deep voice carried across the rooftop. His laughter shook the room. He had been telling the same 3 stories he told at every rap party, each version slightly more exaggerated than the last. The story about the engine that exploded. The story about the producer who tried to fire him. The story about the time he saved a stunt the script supervisor had ruined. Everyone laughed in the right places. Everyone clapped at the right moments. The smiles were polite, but most of them did not reach the eyes. Paul had been watching all of it from the corner. He had heard those stories before. He knew which parts were true and which parts had been quietly invented over the years. He had said nothing. He had let Vin have his moment, because Paul understood something Vin never quite figured out. Real strength does not need a microphone. Real loyalty does not need an audience. But that night something shifted. Vin had been drinking dark whiskey for hours. His voice had grown louder, his eyes harder. The producers had started exchanging worried glances across the room. The cast had started drifting away from the center table. Vin noticed. Vin always noticed when attention slipped away from him. And when he noticed, he reached for the only weapon he ever knew how to use. He reached for the man who never fought back. He stood up from his chair, walked across the room with that slow, heavy stride of his, and placed a hand on Paul's shoulder. The hand looked friendly to anyone watching from a distance. The hand looked like the gesture of a brother, but Paul felt the grip tighten. Paul felt the weight of those fingers digging into the muscle near his collarbone. And then Vin leaned in. He brought his lips close to Paul's ear, close enough that no microphone could pick it up, close enough that no camera could read it from his face. And he whispered 6 words that he believed would put Paul back in his place forever. I carried you through every scene. 6 words, just 6 words. But every single one of them was loaded with 20 years of resentment, of insecurity, of a man who had spent his entire career believing that the only reason audiences kept coming back was because of him alone. 6 words designed to remind Paul that he was the second name on the poster. 6 words designed to remind Paul that without Vin, the franchise would have buried him. 6 words designed to make Paul feel small in front of the only people in the world whose opinion actually mattered to him. Paul did not flinch. Paul did not pull away. Paul did not raise his voice. He just smiled. It was that small, quiet smile that the entire crew had come to recognize over the years. The smile that meant something was about to happen. The smile that meant Paul had been waiting longer than anyone realized. He slowly reached into the inside pocket of his jacket. The room had gone quiet by then because people had begun to sense that something unusual was unfolding. Vin's hand fell away from Paul's shoulder. The producer stopped mid-sentence. The stunt coordinator set his glass down on the table without making a sound. Even the music seemed to soften. Paul pulled out a small black audio tape. It was the old kind, the kind professional sound engineers used on movie sets before everything went digital. It looked harmless. It looked like nothing. But Vin's face changed the moment he saw it. Paul held the tape between his thumb and his index finger. He held it up just high enough for Vin to see it clearly. Then he spoke for the first time that night. His voice was calm. His voice was steady. His voice was the voice of a man who had prepared himself for this conversation for a very long time. "You said that to me 10 years ago at a different rap party," Paul said. "You whispered the same 6 words into my ear in front of a camera you did not know was running." The sound engineer caught it. He gave me the original tape the next morning. He told me to keep it somewhere safe in case I ever needed it. I never thought I would need it, but you said the same 6 words to me again tonight. So now I think I do. The room did not move. Nobody breathed. Nobody dared to look away from the 2 men standing at the center of the rooftop. Vin opened his mouth, then closed it. He tried to laugh, but the laugh did not come out. He tried to play it off as a joke, but his eyes had already given him away. The truth was sitting in Paul's hand. The truth had been sitting in Paul's hand for 10 years, and now everyone in that room knew it. Paul did not raise the tape any higher. Paul did not threaten to release it. Paul did not demand an apology. He simply slid the tape back into his jacket pocket, gave Vin a small nod, and walked toward the exit. He stopped only once at the doorway, just long enough to turn his head back over his shoulder. "I never carried you," Paul said, "and you never carried me. We carried each other. The day you forget that is the day this whole thing falls apart." And then he was gone. The door closed softly behind him. Vin stood alone in the middle of the rooftop, surrounded by people who would never look at him the same way again. The cast members lowered their eyes. The producers turned their backs. Even the bartender suddenly found something interesting to do with the glasses behind the counter. Nobody said the word out loud, but everyone understood what had just happened. The man who had spent 2 decades believing he was the foundation of the franchise had just been reminded, gently, kindly, but unmistakably, that the foundation had always been shared. The story of that tape never made it into any newspaper. Paul never spoke about it again. Vin never mentioned it in a single interview, but the people who were on that rooftop that night carry the memory with them to this day. And every time they hear those 6 words spoken anywhere in any context, they remember the smile on Paul Walker's face, the way he reached into his jacket without anger, and the way he walked out of that room without ever having to raise his voice. Some men prove their strength by shouting. Some men prove their strength by fighting. And then there are men like Paul Walker, who prove their strength by being the only person in the room who has nothing left to prove. In the months that followed that rap party, the dynamic on set changed in ways that almost nobody outside the production noticed. Vin became quieter during cast meetings. He listened more often than he spoke. The crew watched the shift carefully without ever commenting on it. Paul never brought up the tape again. Paul never used it as leverage. Paul never told a single journalist what he had done that night. The black tape stayed inside a small wooden box on a shelf in his garage, untouched, unopened, unmentioned, until the day Paul Walker himself was no longer here to speak for it. If this story made you feel something deep inside, hit that like button right now and subscribe to this channel for more untold moments behind the people we thought we knew. Drop a comment below and tell us what you would have done if you had been holding that tape in your jacket. Would you have used it? Would you have walked away the same way Paul did? Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that quiet strength is the loudest sound in any room. And remember, the people who never raise their voice are usually the ones holding the most weight. See you in the next story.